So as Barb mentioned, I'm Lauren Beetlesbacher, and Jackie is going to give more tactical strategies for composting, but Barb had thought it would be a good idea if I just shared with you why composting is important and kind of the food waste crisis that we have in the United States right now. So as I mentioned, I'm a professor, and I used to study, well, I have always studied retail. And over the past kind of 10 years, I've really decided, hey, no, it just like literally just started. Decided to spend some time thinking about how I can teach my students about sustainability in terms that they would understand. And so the things that we all have in common as humans is that we eat and we wear clothes. And fortunately, or unfortunately, those are two of the biggest contributors to climate change. So fast fashion and food waste. So hopefully Barb will invite me to talk about fast fashion another time because I have big opinions about fast fashion. But until then, I'll talk about food waste. So really, I spent my sabbatical trying to understand how we can, I was on sabbatical last year, trying to really understand how we can minimize food waste. And hello, good, how are you? Oh, no, please come in. So I just want to share with you before Jackie talks to us about a little bit more tactical things about how we can compost, why does it matter? And so I just thought as an exercise, if you could tell me what's your definition of sustainability? Not you two, because you've done this before. But what do you think, what does it mean, what does sustainability mean to you? What do you
like? Not overfish.
Not overfish. That is a wonderful example of being sustainable. Thank you so much. What else does sustainability mean? Courtney, what do you think? I'm calling you in the first row.
I'm focusing on the word sustain, which means like to keep things going.
Mm-hmm.
Only put so much out that I can take back in, or vice versa, to only take as much as I can put back out.
Yeah. So appropriately managing resources. What do you think of when you think of sustainability?
I think a balance, I feel like, of like just making sure that you're not overdoing what you've done, that you can't like take it back.
Replenish. Yeah. Anything different? Yeah.
Not really. It's just we're such a consumption.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Society. Yes, we are.
Society, but just even where we live, to figure out what that balance is and to be able to sustain it and not keep destroying the planet.
So it's interesting because, for something that's so important, none of us really have a shared definition of sustainability. So according to the United Nations, sustainability, and you all kind of said this, right? Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And a lot of times, though, what we think about when we think about sustainability is solely environmental sustainability. And as a country, we really need to think about the societal and economic implications of sustainability as well. And even though when we talk about food waste, we'll talk about primarily the environmental implications, there are huge societal and injustice implications with food waste as well. So sustainability, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. So exactly what you guys just said, putting back what we put in. And a lot of times, especially my students, I teach at this school that's primarily focused on business, and it's like, how can we do this while still make money? You can totally be capitalist and make money and be sustainable, right? And we can make the argument that, especially with greener jobs and looking at new fuel efficiency models, that you can actually do it better, right? There's a way to be successful and profitable doing both. But we're here today to really focus primarily on food waste. So I just want to give a little bit of statistics. So roughly a third of the world's food is wasted. According to the world's counts, that's 1.3 billion tons of food a year just wasted. All of the food produced but never eaten would feed 2 billion people. In industrialized countries, which is what we are, the United States is a developed industrialized company, more than 40% of losses happen at the retail and consumer level. So that means in our households or at the retail level. But if you think about it, a retailer like a Roach Brothers or Shaw's or whatever, their margins on how they sell stuff are really small. So they don't want to waste stuff because it erodes their already very small margins. So when we see that 40%, it's mostly at home with us. And if wasted food were a country, it would be the 3rd largest producer of carbon dioxide after the US and China. Welcome. Yes. We're currently talking about food waste because I'm hoping that this motivates you all to compost more. So just to see kind of how big of a problem food waste is, and not to put things together, but just like sometimes we might think, oh, our vote doesn't count. It does, and so does our food waste. Our food waste counts too. Every bit of food that we waste, it all goes into that. So even though like thinking of 1.3 billion tons of food, it's like, oh, am I really wasting that much? Yes, we all are. So, and we're contributing to it as a society. We're the worst. We average 325 pounds of waste per person. So, welcome. That means we discard more food than any other country in the world, approximately 120 billion pounds of food. And so now that we kind of have a scope of this, let's just think about what are some of the implications of this food waste. Huge resource depletion. It's a huge water depletion. All of the water that goes in to build those crops is thus wasted. There's a huge land loss of biodiversity, and there's an energy suck throughout the supply chain. So it is one of the largest contributors to climate change after oil and gas. Fast fashion, fashion is the number 2 environmental degradator, and food waste is right up there with it. So the other impacts that it has are air from pollutants like ammonia, the water from the fertilizer and pesticide runoff. The more we have fertilizer and pesticide to grow these larger crops, because of this overconsumption, the more that fertilizer and pesticide goes into our water source. It also really impacts our biodiversity. So to my friend's point here about the overfishing, this is a huge problem because we're wasting all of this beautiful seafood, and so then people are overfishing, and it's really messing with the ecosystem of the ocean. We also have, and I don't want anybody to sleep on this because this is perhaps the most important, is the societal impacts. I mean, food insecurity is a really big deal, even in our own community, and there's huge economic losses associated with food waste. Food waste also causes 58% of methane emissions from solid waste landfills. So, a lot of times we think plastic is bad. Plastic is bad. Single-use plastic is bad. I don't want to, but so is food waste. You hear people like, oh, I'm just going to put the food in and it'll compost. Putting it into like an unstructured landfill type environment is not the right way, right? We'll learn about composting. So keeping food out of landfills will help tackle climate change. It will make a significant impact on the methane emissions. Why do we waste food? There's a lot of reasons. We buy or order too much. How many of us were told to eat everything on our plate when we were growing up, right? And this has implications for so many other things, right? Body dysmorphia, all these other things. We buy or order too much. I know that I'm from New Orleans. Food is my love language. It's how I show love. If you come to my house, I will have too much food, but I won't throw it away. I'll freeze it, we'll use it again. We store food incorrectly. What do you mean store food? How we put it in like a container or the refrigerator, or how we keep it. We can freeze stuff and maybe we might not freeze it. That's a wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking. We won't buy damaged or imperfect food. There's all kinds of research that show, we see this ugly food movement. We won't buy it. I did this study even with my students where we showed dented soup cans, and they wouldn't buy it. The soup isn't hurt, right? The soup just moves, but we wouldn't buy it. We also don't understand expiration labels. I'm a marketing professor. Not all marketers are good. Some expiration labels are just to get you to buy more. So if you're looking at expiration labels on spices, all they've done is has reduced potency. They're still edible, right? So there's lots of misinformation about expiration labels. If we buy something, we want to buy something with a longer expiration label, so then we let the stuff that's about to expire. really that's the biggest reason that we waste food, is because we see this expiration label and we've been conditioned to think, oh, it's gone bad. So just to show kind of through the supply chain where it all comes from, 43% of the food waste does happen in homes, so we can make a difference. 40% happens in restaurants, grocery stores, food service companies. I really, from my own research, I can't like give this number like with complete confidence, but I will say that this is more restaurants and food service than it is grocery. 16% happens at the farms with just bad manufacturing and production, and then 2% happens at the processing plant. So just so you can see, so we really have a huge opportunity within our own household. And if you go to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, this is one of the most important Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. We use this food loss index to measure losses along the food supply chain, starting from post-harvest, but not always including the retail stage. So the food waste index, this is hard to see, but it's just showing food waste really happens at the household more in the manufacturing or at food service or at retail, just according to this food waste index from the United Nations. This is the Environmental Protection Agency is really starting to put more of an emphasis on food waste. And you can see that kind of, they give this diagram about what's the best way to reduce food waste. Composting is right here. Obviously, the most preferred is to stop it at consumption, right? To just don't buy what you're not going to eat. To donate, rescue, and redistribute it, upcycle it, repurpose food for human consumption, or to use it to feed animals, or to leave it unharvested and let animals harvest on it and to rebuild the natural biodiversity. Also to break down wasted food soil to create energy in a soil amendment. That's some anaerobic digestion. You can also use it to create energy. Obviously the worst thing is sending it down the drain, landfill, or even worse, incinerating it. So another way, and this is just the same diagram, looking at it like this is the best, most preferred. Reduce the source. Everything, our whole economy is built on supply and demand, right? So companies will supply what we demand. So if we reduce our demand, they will reduce the supply. So if we, a lot of times we really look to policymakers or businesses, but they're reacting to us. And so we can, motivate with our dollars. So if we reduce the consumption, they'll reduce the production. So other things that we can do, we are seeing a lot of artificial intelligence at the retail level to help retailers figure out how they can, especially with the most perishable items, which are produce. By the way, I didn't know this, but bananas are the least sustainable fruit. Anybody know why? You know why. Did I tell you this? Why? Yeah.
Too much water?
Nope.
Where it comes from? How we get it?
Yeah, so there are no bananas made in the continental United States. No bananas produced in the continental United States. So they're produced in the southern hemisphere, and so they're picked when they're like literally rock hard, and they have to travel a long way to get to us. And then when they get to us, they're chemically induced ripened. So that's why you'll see on TikTok or any social media, like if you want to ripen your avocado, put it in a bag with a banana. But that's because the gas emitted from the banana is going to artificially ripen your, even an organic banana has chemicals in it. So any distribution center that brings in bananas has to put them in a different room because the chemicals will emanate from them and kind of contaminate the other food. So not to ruin bananas for anybody. Yes, my friend.
Are bananas an illegal food?
An illegal food? No, they're not an illegal food. I don't know if there's any illegal foods. I mean, I have illegal foods in my house for my kids, but I don't know about any illegal foods. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Just not very sustainable. So we're seeing, maybe artificial intelligence is kind of scary, as an academic to think about my students not being able to form their own coherent thoughts is a little terrifying. But when we can put it to use like this to help store associates manage their time and find rotate the fruit and the vegetables faster, that's a wonderful use of artificial intelligence. We can make customers more price conscious. We see things like Eat Soon, which is something that it's a kind of vending machine that is in Europe, and basically food that's perishable will go in, and it will go in this beautiful kind of machine, and a customer can pull it out and see the expiration date and scan it, and would get a new ticket with a new price that's correlated to its expiration date. And so then there's an incentive to buy stuff at a lower price, and then you've taken out that labor expense of re-ticketing stuff and checking everything. So there's an incentive if you're buying something just in time. Really trying to appeal to people's sustainability, just reminding people like the less we eat and the less water, we don't need to eat less, we need to waste less. The less we waste and the less water we waste, the more sustainable we are, and how, thinking about even just less meat, food waste is really bad. Meat food waste is really, really bad. Getting into more of a routine. So the more comfortable we are with routines, the more we encourage people to meal plan, the less that they waste food. So if we have, there's some cultures that go to the market and buy what they need for the day and maybe waste less. Typically, we think in this society, planning for the week is a little bit better, just because we don't have the same kind of market system as other countries have. So planning for the week actually helps us minimize waste because it reduces those impulse purchases. Shaming people. I know that this looks really bad, but it's a powerful motivator. If we can make waste socially unacceptable, then people might start to rethink their purchases. If, I don't want to go to you in the grocery store and be like, are you really going to eat that banana? But if we could talk about food waste more and talk about the implications more and really make this more of, just make this more of a social norm, and we can develop food conservation into our societal norms. So, maybe we don't want to outwardly shame people, but maybe there's just some self-reflection associated with that. And I know that sounds really bad, but this probably is the only way we're actually going to get people to change their behavior. So all of my research indicates this is the way. So, but it's uncomfortable to talk about. Other things that we've seen are options like Too Good To Go, which I'm assuming that we're all familiar with Too Good To Go, is just using, having this kind of surprise bag of food. And then like Hellmann's, for example, has all kinds of really clever recipes on their website of ways that, you can use products that are about to expire. Even for me, thinking about mayonnaise that's about to expire is uncomfortable. But, they do offer kind of more tips, and Unilever especially. Unilever is not always a pioneer in sustainability, but does have some really clever solutions around food waste and helping educate customers. And then, of course, composting. So that is, what I don't want is for us to say, oh, this isn't bad because I'm going to compost it, right? A lot of us recycle stuff and think that, oh, we're doing a great job because we're recycling it. But like 90% of what we put in recycling doesn't get recycled. And so if we are going to compost, if that's going to be our food waste strategy, our food waste strategy first and foremost should be to buy what we need. Second of all, if we do have something that we need to throw away, is to compost it in a meaningful way and to do it in a way that actually doesn't contaminate the compost. And I'm going to turn it over to my lovely colleague, Jackie, now to talk to us about the tactical ways of composting.
So my name's Jackie Alford. I was a part of the Transfer Station and Recycling Committee for I think about 4 years. I recently had to take a little bit of a step back due to my work schedule, which involves a lot of travel, but I was actively engaged in the composting program that the town offers, and I'm a co-chair of Sustainable Medfield, which you guys may have heard of, which has information on composting both for yard waste and food waste on our portal or website, sustainablemedfield.org. There's also a subcommittee that's Medfield for Food Composting with curbside composting that we're trying to bring to town. So I'll tell you about that at the end. What I really want to talk to you about right now is what you can do in your own home, in your backyard composting, which is the easiest, most convenient way to get started with food composting. And then you can even take it a step further by utilizing the composting program that the transfer station has, where there are big green bins or totes. They're like the big totes that people who have trash pickup take, and you may see it at the tip floor or trash drop-off area to the right side. There's 5 of them now, and I often hear people saying, oh, this is the smelly part, because food waste does emit gas and it lets off smell, but we'll get a little more to why that is so important. So, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know that Lauren gave a lot of great info on the why and implications of food composting, but just as a wrap up or to kind of conclude, about 40% of all food wasted in the US comes, or about 40% of all the food in the US ends up being wasted, either because, like she said, it's stored improperly. So if you've ever put bread in a spot and you think that you just got it, and then you go and you look at it and it's like moldy somehow, or something gets pushed to the back of the fridge, and lo and behold, you find out like, whoa, this looks like it's way past its expiration. Food waste is heavy, so it makes up, according to Mass DEP, it makes up about 20% by weight of our trash, which has its own implications. She did touch on the fact that incineration is really not good with food waste, and our waste here in Medfield is incinerated. Most of the waste in the state of Massachusetts is incinerated. Massachusetts is almost out of landfill space, so it's incinerated, and then the ash is actually trucked to other states' landfills. So if we reduce the amount of trash that's being incinerated, we reduce the amount of ash that needs to be transported and put in a landfill in a state like New Hampshire. There's a couple different locations, but I do know a good amount is going to New Hampshire. Methane is a greenhouse gas. We talk a lot in sustainability about your carbon footprint. I think students hear a lot. There's all kinds of calculators. Methane is significantly more potent. A lot of times the numbers thrown around are up to 80%. I was saying 8. Some sources will say up to 84%, but it is very significant. So if you're looking at how can I reduce my footprint, whether it's carbon or methane, a lot of the options are things that are kind of a big undertaking. Like you'll hear get an electric vehicle or put solar on your home. Those are amazing things, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about that because I've gone down that path myself, but it has to be the right timing. There's an investment. Food composting is something you can do tonight when you go home. Like if you're not already doing it, you can begin to save your scraps and start composting with no cost. Any of the material produced when you compost can be utilized to improve soil health. So if you're a gardener, if you're not, maybe you could give it to a friend or neighbor that is a gardener. And it's just really a simple, effective way that you can help with saving our environment. The company that we work with here in town is called Black Earth. This is kind of repetitive, but they gave me and our committee some info sheets. So I do have a few of these handouts. They're top 5 reasons to compost, but I thought I'd just put it up here, keeping food waste out of the waste stream. We talked about incineration and then shipping it, to a landfill elsewhere. You can improve ecological health by composting. There's a lot of talk right now about decreased biodiversity. waste products like fertilizers that get into the water streams. So by composting, you can really help in that regard, even though it might not seem like it right away. Composting improves soil health. If you compost in a farm or your yard, it brings in good bacteria. It helps the soil retain more water. It also helps the soil, in fact, capture carbon. So when we talk about carbon reduction, adding compost back into the soil and regenerative farming, it's a real positive. You can help build a more resilient state here in Massachusetts and our country. I believe Lauren had mentioned there are green jobs that are generated by companies like Black Earth that focus on capturing food waste, and some of the farms that are utilizing compost material. And then it really is easy. So I'm going to get to that in just a second, but it's incredibly simple. So we can talk about how you can get started. There's actually several different composting options. Some of you might have a black bin like this. I see you guys nodding, and Steve back there. I know I have one. Barbara has actually run the distribution here in town. Intermittently, the transfer station will have these bins at a reduced rate that you can purchase. And I don't know if you're subscribed to the transfer station's newsletter, but if you're not, maybe you can talk to Barbara or me at the end, because that's where you can find an announcement when these are available. You can also pick one up at Home Depot or a lot of other hardware stores, or get it, through Amazon if you wanted to. But you can do a backyard program, which I do in my home. You also can take part in the transfer stations program, which is really nice because institutional composting will capture more materials. So if it's in your backyard, those of you who are already doing this are probably aware, it really needs to be fruit and it needs to be produce, essentially, or eggshells or coffee grounds. Whereas if you utilize the town's program, if you ate chicken wings watching the Patriots, and you have the bones, or roasted a chicken, or we're coming up on Thanksgiving and you have a carcass or skin, all of that can be left at the transfer station in the bins. So and that is actually the material that gives off even more gas if it's incinerated or goes into a landfill. So it's that material that is actually really good if you can take advantage of the free program that the town has. And you can see more information at the transfer station. They have a huge sign that shows you what you can do and how you can compost it. Probably the number one thing that Barbara would want me to mention is that just please do not drop it off in a plastic bag. So I knew she'd probably, because, and we'll get to this in 1 second. That's why I have this little prop here. So there are some practical tips, and I kind of had to rush here right after work. The easiest way I have found to compost, if you're going to take material to the transfer station, you can collect it in one of these bio bags. The image that I have on the slide is a type that's sold at Will's Hardware. This, I believe I got this in Shaw's. It was either Shaw's or Roach Brothers because I ran out. So I alternate. I like to get them from Will's, but sometimes if I'm out and I know I'm in another store, they're not expensive. And these are actually a corn-derived product. So these break down in institutional composting. The problem is if you try to put this in your black backyard, but I know, well, because, and I mean, I am hoping that some of them call it out more clearly and some of them do not. You have to really be looking for it to realize that it won't break down, because The institutional programs are getting heated up a little bit more than what will happen naturally and passively in your backyard. But if you're going to do that, I just keep a small bin. It's on my counter. I have this liner. We collect throughout the week, and then I just take it and I put it into one of the 5-gallon drums that you can get at any hardware store. They have a screw top with a gasket, so if it tips over in your car, you know, sometimes whenever you put food waste together, it will on its own, with enzymes and various compounds in it, it will generate a little bit of heat on its own, and it will kind of cook itself. So you might find when you remove a bag, there's a little bit of liquid at the base, and that can be a little icky, you know? So that's why I like using the screw top 5-gallon pail to transfer it to the transfer station. Another thing, you know, I collect as I'm cooking and chopping. So last night, you know, we were having enchiladas, chicken enchiladas, but as I'm chopping my onions, I am peeling it. The peel and the end is going directly in this bag. I'm not putting it down the disposal. I'm not, because some people, I've had someone challenge me and say, well, what if I just put it all down the disposal? But then it's going through our water filtration system. There's a lot of extra energy and processes, whereas you can just save it and have it go to something positive, like improving the soil and all of that. You don't even have to have a bin though. Like literally, if you want to tonight start this, you can take a Ziploc bag, you can take a Tupperware container with a lid, keep it in your freezer, put small amounts of food scraps in as you go along. So if you peel a couple carrots or an orange, a banana, which I think we all learned about bananas a little bit today. I did not know that they were the least sustainable fruit. You can just keep it in your freezer, and then either, if it's only produce, move it to your backyard composter when you have time, or take it to the transfer station. So I think it is actually quite straightforward. So in your backyard composter, to make it work the most effectively and to get the best material out, especially if you want to utilize it in your own gardens, ideally you'll be layering. There is a layer that's considered green, or sometimes referred to as wet. That's a nitrogen-rich layer, and what that would be is the produce scraps that you generate or lawn clippings are actually very nitrogen rich. So you ideally will alternate a green or wet layer with a brown or dry layer, and that is leaves or maybe even smaller twigs, or if you happen to have hay in your yard, those are considered carbon-rich layers. And it's the layering of these materials that actually expedites the breakdown of what's in there. So right now, as you're clearing your yard, whether you have it removed professionally, which I know the blowers were out in my neighborhood this afternoon, and I had some virtual meetings, and I was like, they sound like they're, you know, behind me or something. I'm saving a couple bags of leaves so that then next spring and summer, I have the leaves. Like, I'm not going to get rid of them all, because the leaves in your yard are an excellent extra brown layer. Another item you can use is you can actually tear up some newspaper sheets and use those as the quote brown or carbon layer. But a lot of people, if they don't put layers at some, and you don't have to, I mean, this doesn't have to be a precise science. I mean, you can be putting, you know, produce and stuff in, or maybe you have house plants and you get some dead leaves or leaves in the yard, you put that down. But if you want it to actually break down nicely and be able to get material out of it, it really does make a difference if you layer. So you can take a, oh, sorry, yes.
Oh, I've seen lint, you can use lint from your lint trap. Would that be considered brown?
Oh boy, you know something? That's one. I will get your name at the end and get an answer because I have not been putting that in my compost, but I would imagine that would be considered the brown or dry layer. But I'll check on that because that's a good one.
It's dicey because you don't know which of those clothes are synthetic.
Well, right, that's.
Have plastic in them.
That is a good point because I'm fascinated. I'm going to encourage Lauren to talk on fast fashion. I know that's one of her passions, but one of the reasons why, I mean, it's terrible for a lot of reasons, but there's increasing amount of plastics in the clothing. So that might be something to consider. But another tip would be to stir. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you? Yeah.
Well, you're just about to talk about stirring it, and it seems to me that those conflict because if you're putting it in layers and then you're mixing them up, you're
I know. Well, and no, and I knew that was probably going to. I think it's actually more having a mix in it so that it's not all green and wet. So some of the tutorials that you can find online are showing people how to create like a compost pit or like a open crate, and they're like if you're on a farm or you have more space. And there, when they set it up, they set up an initial layer, and they're very careful, you know what I mean, to get a few layers, let it sit for a while so that it generates that internal heat. And believe it or not, there's people that even will put a thermometer in. They are trying to measure. That's not going into winter in New England, you know, but if you're counting on it in a farm. But I think it's more the point that you get a mix, and then as you stir it, you're bringing up some of the stuff that's a little more decomposed to have the bacteria in that work on the newer material. I hope that makes sense. Yep. Sorry if I'm saying this in a confusing way. I don't mean to. And when I stir, we have like kind of like a pitchfork looking yard tool that I use. You can use a shovel, and it doesn't have to be massively amounts of stir, but it's just basically getting some movement in there.
It also gets some oxygen in.
It gets the oxygen, right? So you're kind of turning. Yes.
I like to, when I put fresh stuff in, I like to dig it into the compost because the critters love to get
right.
Fresh
That's
stuff on top.
right.
If it's all mixed in, they're kind of like
right. They're not going to dig too deep. That's a great. Well, so you're being more upfront with, you know what I mean, getting it in there, and that's probably a better approach. You will find that it will break down more quickly if you cut the food into smaller pieces. So, you know, harder items like a watermelon rind. If you had a nice big slice of watermelon and you put that big outer rind in, or a half a grapefruit, I guarantee you're going to see that for quite a while. Is if you could take a moment and just cut it into a few smaller pieces, you're going to help it break down. There is some good. Oh, did you want? Oh, okay. There is some good information on the mass.gov website, and if you just punch in composting, you can get some more details. I do have a few of these little, these are older, Barbara, but they give you their backyard. Right, they still have it, but I do actually have a couple hard copies if anybody wants one. And let's see. So I just wanted to say, once you begin, you realize it really is, like now it's just automatic for me. I don't really have to think about it.
We have to clear the room by 6.
Oh, yes. I literally have I've got less than 5 minutes. So it's very easy. And I've noted, because we do compost, and I'm imagining that each one, by the fact that you chose to be here between 5 and 6 on a weeknight, shows that you have some interest, and there's a high probability that you're recycling. So once you get recycling and composting, our trash is down to like a bag a week, or even maybe 2 at the max. It's pretty incredible, and you'll notice that your trash doesn't smell bad like it sometimes can, because once you're getting all of that out, it really is nice. Now, I just learned as I was preparing to come here, in between some work meetings, I was looking online to see, like, has anything big changed? Because we did this in the spring as well. And I came across Cooked is a newsletter from WBUR. This did not cut and paste as well as I had wanted it to, but I signed up. It's a 12-part newsletter series on, it's very informative. Like I just was kind of scrolling through. So I want to encourage you, if you go to just WBUR's website or you put in newsletter Cooked, you can find it and register. But I wanted to just, the final comment I wanted to make. So I have a few of these sheets. If anybody would like this information, I have a few of the backyard composting, but for anyone who is interested, there is the movement in town to get Black Earth to come and do curbside pickup of compost. So we need to get 100 households pre-registered. There's no financial commitment. I am actually signing up for it because we travel a fair amount, and I'm in the routine of using the transfer station's program for things. We're not vegan in our house, so we do have some meat products or cheese products. And if you miss going to the transfer station, and God forbid you let it go like 2 weeks or something, it's just a real convenience. So if anyone wants info on that, I'm happy to give you an info sheet.
Question.
Yes.
What creatures can we use for compost?
What, yes, I'm not sure if I,
Creatures could we use for compost?
So like worms or soldier flies, or there anything else?
oh, that you can, there are, you will find that you will get, have you seen worms in your compost? Because they find it. It's loaded, right? There's like a lot. I haven't added anything myself. I just found that it kind of happened naturally. It sounds like you guys already have some. That would be a cool school project, though, to see like what can you observe, you know, that without digging too deep into it, because, but that's a really good question.
I just got mine started.
Okay.
Is there any benefit to dumping a little bit of dirt from my garden in there?
There is, and so
Going into winter, obviously, but to get everything kind of moving and
yes.
find a few worms in there.
That's actually a bullet that I should add to that one slide. And I talked about how sometimes in a larger space you'll see like a big compost pit, and they do recommend, there are bacteria and different, you know, compounds in it. So yes, that a very thin, and that if you want to put that just on the top for a little while, that would be beneficial.
Okay.
Yes. Hi.
Well, I add water,
Oh,
especially this time of year. This right now when there's rain,
yes.
it really slows down the breakdown when it's really, really dry.
Right.
So I just pour in a gallon of water once a week, and that
Okay.
helps
it break.
But the other tip,
Okay.
I learned this the hard way, is that all those little annoying plastic labels that are on the fruit, peel those off.
Right.
And it's a pain, but there's nothing worse than digging in your garden and seeing those.
And seeing it, right.
And you put them there.
Right. No, you know, you guys are making great. I was like trying to rush, and I'm like going, oh my gosh, there's all these basic tips that yes, I would say I always try to remove that. And then every once in a while I'll see one in there and I'm like, oh, somebody in the family. It's of course not me, right? That would it. But then I'll try to dig it out. But and especially now in a drought, I do find when we have normal rainfall, it's almost like my black backyard one, a little bit of moisture gets in because there are some air holes, you know, so that it circulates. But it is very smart to add a little bit of water to it because that just keeps it cooking, basically. So I hope that this was helpful. It sounds like you guys are all, I know, Wendy, you're doing composting right through the transfer station. Has anybody else utilized the transfer station program or? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I do in the winter.
Yes. Because in the winter, you can continue so back when we had a lot of snowfall, most people tend to put their compost bin in like a back corner, or for us, it's behind the shed in a not so visible spot. And when it was, you know, deep snow kind of weather, it gets a little more difficult. So it is much easier to go to the but now we don't really get that type of snow as much. So you can add to it. It just will kind of, as it's frozen, it won't really do very much until things thaw out and it heats up a little bit. But, well, thank you guys. And if anybody wants more info, I'm happy to hand it out. And thank you to Barbara for arranging this.
Thank you.
This was wonderful.